So my name is Laura, and today I'm going to be refuting the claim by Javier Martinez that animal testing is unnecessary. His secondary claims are that 1, animal testing is morally objectionable, 2, animal testing has been proven to be scientifically inefficient, and 3, that in our modern world, we have now developed many alternatives to animal testing. In reality, animal testing has actually proven to be an important contribution to the advancement of various forms of science. So his first claim fails to prove his point because he uses a claim of value to try to justify a claim of fact. In this kind of claim, you can definitely question the morality of it because it doesn't really determine our alternatives to animal testing. Would a moral way of scientific advancement be using human testing? Or it doesn't really explore the medical and scientific potential that is trying to be achieved through animal testing. In addition, he uses evidence by a philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, but that's not very convincing because he is a philosopher and not a scientist. And if animal testing is in reality not necessary, we should be taking the advice of a professional in the field to tell us what is necessary and what is not necessary. There's not much authority present in this claim. And in addition, he argues that animals are similar to humans biologically, and then in his second claim kind of flips his point and says they are not similar enough for animal testing to be significant. When having to do with his second claim, that animal testing has been proven to be scientifically inefficient, he uses a Pew Research Center poll to show that an average American is split 50-50 when having to do with their opinion about whether science needs animal testing. How qualified are these American adults to determine if animal testing is in reality morally objectionable or not? That's what we really need to consider in this situation. Also, he argues that we have cured mice of cancer for decades and it simply didn't work in humans, but it doesn't look at the other advantages that have been achieved through animal testing. For example, there is proof that thanks in large part to animal-based research, there is a new molecular and genetic understanding of tumor biology, leading to treatments that set out to more directly kill cancer cells. So maybe we may not be directly curing cancer and there's no set cure for it, but we can understand how cancer forms and things like that will eventually, hopefully, come up with a cure. Also, there are other forms that animal testing can benefit humanity, not just necessarily curing cancer. Although it may seem silly, but there is an example where a pharmaceutical company in the USA created a chemical compound in a food item. And this was poisonous to humans, but the company's chief pharmacist and chemist was not aware of this. He simply added raspberry flavoring to this sulfa drug, which he had dissolved in DEG, and the company marketed the product. The preparation led to mass poisoning, causing the deaths of more than 100 people because there was no animal testing present in this product. So many people were poisoned as a result of excluding animal testing. His last point, that in our modern world, we have now developed many alternatives to animal testing, is also flawed. He mentions the alternatives to animal testing, but he doesn't have any proof comparing animal testing versus the alternatives and how they are used in day-to-day life. And also, he fails to consider that these alternatives were developed with animal testing. For example, the 2010 Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to Robert G. Edwards for his pioneering work in the field of in vitro fertilization. He was first inspired to investigate human fertilization while working on mouse embryos in his PhD research. Also, he does not explain the extremity of what animal testing means. That's kind of a very broad term, animal testing. He kind of thought about it as torturing animals and putting them through hell, but in reality, there are new breakthroughs being considered in animal testing using the 3 R's, which advocates the search for, first, the replacement of animals with non-living models, the reduction of use of animals, and the refinement of animal practices. So he fails to consider that there are actually being changes in science for animal testing. So to conclude my points, his claim is biased, overgeneralized, and has multiple flaws, and there are definitely many benefits resulting from the scientific use of animal testing. Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff at the beginning is fine. The point on the first part where you're talking about it being a value claim, I think that that's a very legitimate criticism of the argument. The idea that philosophers expressing opinions on matters of value is appropriate, but not necessarily on matters of science. I think that's a legitimate point to make, especially if you can demonstrate that there are, in fact, advantages that come from animal research, which you do to some degree. I think you could probably use a little bit more definitive example at that, but otherwise it's mostly an assertion on your point. I do like the dilemma that you set up where you, in essence, say, look, there's a challenge to whether or not they are similar enough when people say we can't get these results, but on the contrary, they say they are so similar to humans that we ought to be looking at them as if they have the same kinds of rights. I think that that is an interesting dilemma that you're talking about there. On the issue of it being effective, I did like the argument that you made about the mice and how the advocate said, oh, we've cured cancer in mice, but we haven't been able to do anything with humans in regard to that. I thought that you had a very good follow-up here. I think you need a source on it, because otherwise it's just an assertion, and I'm sure that you've got some information, something that you're citing here, but it's not very clearly cited here, and I think that's problematic. The example of benefiting from testing on animals, and you've got that story about the poison that they just covered up with the flavor, and then we had 100 people who died. That sounds like it's a good concrete example, but again, it's vaguely referenced. There's no source citation on it, and I don't know where that took place and what the substance was, and I think the abstractness of that reference is a little bit problematic. The argument about the alternatives, I thought that those were the right kinds of responses to be making on that point. All right, thank you.